This meeting is now called to order, and I will just take a second to pull up my slides, if you will bear with me. And here comes Michael Lushing. Okay. So once again, welcome. Here is our agenda for today. Jim Crane, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Okay, everyone, put your hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Jim. And Chris, you are a co-host, so please feel free. I'll stop the slides and please feel free to share your screen.
Okay, very good. I'll do that in just 1 second.
Sure.
So, thought for the day today. And this is not just directed to the lawyers out there, but it's directed to everyone, I think. Every law school student learns in their first year that there are always at least two sides to every argument, and that as a lawyer, you must be able to argue both sides with equal force and passion. With all of the social media, news, and political discourse so prevalent today, I thought that it would be helpful to reflect on what some great minds have written on this issue. I'm going to share my screen.
Just wait.
The first written quote is from John Stuart Mill, who I hope many of you are familiar with. He states that he who only knows his side of the case knows little of that. His reasons may be good, and no one may have been able to refute them, but if he is equally unable to refute the reasons on the opposite side, if he does not so much as know what they are, he has no ground for preferring either opinion. Nor is it enough that he should hear the arguments of his adversaries from his own teachers, presented as they state them, and accompanied by what they offer as refutations. He must be able to hear them from persons who actually believe them, who defend them in earnest, and to do their very utmost for them. Second one on this, I think the lawyers will appreciate. The Paper Chase was a famous book that many of you may have read. Professor Kingsfield is quoted as saying, "At times you may feel you have found the correct answer. I assure you that this is a total delusion on your part. You will never find the correct, absolute, and final answer." So I hope when you're paying attention to the talking heads in the media that you'll keep some of these thoughts in mind.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Chris. And now, and welcome to those who just joined us. Excuse me while I pull my slides back up. Okay. Whoop. Well, it is being a little bit finicky. Ed, our songmeister and soloist for the duration of the pandemic, would you please share today's song? Ed, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, and yeah, this is an old favorite. It's short and sweet. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. The other night, dear, as I lay sleeping, I dreamt I held you in my arms. When I awoke, dear, I was mistaken. So I hung my son's head and cried. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy when skies are gray. You'll never know, dear, how much I love you. Please don't take my sunshine away. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And now we have several people to welcome. We want to first welcome our distinguished guest speaker for today, who we will speak about a bit more momentarily. Cozette Vergari is also a past district governor. And we want to welcome Michael Lushing, who is our honored assistant governor for this club. And we have some special guests. We want to welcome Roxanne Dennis back. And Mark, would you like to say something about Roxanne? Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Happy to. You know, Roxanne is part of the staff at Compass that is a support staff that is so helpful to all of us that are agents, because as agents, we don't have a life anyway, but she kind of jumps in the middle of it on the marketing, which is so confusing and so involved, and brings some clarity to all the chaos. But in the time that I've been spending with Roxanne and working on it, it comes out that her grandfather, she was very close to, was not just a Rotarian, but a very renowned Rotarian in Peru. And he's a member of parliament, you know, quite a family that she comes back from. And it looks like my building fire alarm is going off, so I guess the building's on fire.
Yeah, it's a warning all over West LA.
Oh, natural gas leak. Okay, anyway, and I invited her to join us and see what we do. And she's community minded, and she's a wonderful young woman with a background in economics. So she's a very interesting person.
Thank you, Mark, and welcome, Roxanne. It's lovely to see you again. And we have another special guest, Benjamin Fisher, with us today. Michael Newman, would you like to introduce Benjamin?
Please. It's my pleasure to introduce Benjamin Fisher. I'm glad that some of you got to meet him in the chat earlier. He's had a varied career. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at one point it was marketing and other business interests. But he's now the owner of a strength training facility in Brentwood Village, which is really right across from the Veterans Administration in Brentwood School. And so he knows the VA well, and I was able to discuss with him VA projects. But what I thought was most interesting is his life has mostly been on the West Side. And he, when his children were younger, worked with Indian guides in the YMCA. And so he knows many of the people in our club without realizing it till we were talking. But for instance, he's known Ann Sampson for years. He was happy to hear that Aaron Donahue of the Y is a member now. And I explained the support of both the older Y down on Sawtell and the new Y, how many Rotarians contributed individually, and what our club's done with the Y and Parkinson's program and what have you. With his kids, he went to Camp Whittle, and I mentioned we have Scott Whittle. So there's a lot of people in the club he will know, and I think it'll be a lot of fun for everyone. And his sponsor is RUSPA, who he's known for about 5 years or more. And just very pleased to introduce Benjamin Fisher. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. So thank you all for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. And Next, we have a few announcements. First, today is Gail Smith's birthday, so we want to say happy birthday again on the actual day. I hope it's lovely, and I'm delighted that you took time out of your away from your birthday celebrations to join us. And sorry, today is Earth Day, as everyone knows, and the environment is now one of Rotary's key areas of focus. The Environmental Sustainability Rotarian Action Group, was formed to empower Rotarians to take action worldwide to sustain our environment, and it's very impressive to see the scope of the work that's already being carried on. In case anyone's interested, they're going to be holding a webinar next Wednesday on industrial recycling, turning waste into an asset. And I put the URL for this group there. I didn't put the time down because I believe it's actually being broadcast from India. So we'll have to figure out what the local time is, but if this is something that appeals to you, it sounds as if it will be very worthwhile. And we have several district events. The Rotary Youth Action, the Rotary Youth Leadership Assembly is being held virtually on Saturday. Diane, and I don't see Phil here yet. Diane, would you like to give our members an update about our involvement?
So the Westwood Village Rotary will be sponsoring 4 high school students at RILA this year. 2 will be coming from my facility here, the Transitional Village, and 2 are coming from the University High School. It's now a one-day event because it's via Zoom, unfortunately, and not a long weekend at Big Bear. But anyway, yeah, we're very well represented, and the kids will all come back and speak to us after the event.
That's a great idea. Thank you, Diane. And on May 4th is our next district breakfast. We'll be featuring Lucy Meyer, and this will be our final district breakfast for this Rotary year. So it sounds very worthwhile, and you don't have to go anywhere. So I recommend it highly. And then in mid-May is the district conference, and registration is now open. So I hope as many of us as possible will participate. It should be delightful and interesting, especially the Friday night pub crawl. I have to say, I'm pretty curious about how you do a virtual pub crawl, but I'm open to figuring out what that is. And Diane, I think you had mentioned some thoughts, so we'll have to circle back on that. So I do encourage everyone to take part if at all possible. Ron Leister is serving as our scribe for today's meeting. Thank you, Ron, along with everything else you do for us. It's greatly appreciated. And now I have the privilege of introducing a Rotarian and a truly remarkable human being. Cozette Vergari is past district governor for District 5280 for the 2017-2018 Rotary year. She's a member of the Rotary Club of Westchester. She is a board member and the U.S. representative to the Rotary Worldwide Action Group Against Slavery. And she is, and I think I heard you say, Cozette, now a retired estate planning attorney. She was the founding partner of Vergari and Napolitano, and has from all, in fact, we could spend the time talking about your fascinating career. She's also trained in mediation. And the thing that I love is that before her law career, she had a career in the performing arts. So you can't be much more well-rounded than Cozette. So Cozette, over to you. Thank you for joining us.
And thank you so much, President Nancy. I really am excited to be here. Thank you for the opportunity to speak about this very important issue. And I'm going to take a moment now to try to share my screen with you.
I made you co-host, so it should.
Yeah, it just flipped in there. So let's see. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, and then the second challenge is always to make sure that the screen is advancing. So let me just test that out. And it's one of 4 different ways. So I always, and it changes from time to time. So I have to figure out, did that advance for you? Did it go to the January slide?
It did.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, good. Okay, so. All right, so I'm speaking today about the very serious issue of human trafficking. And to some of you may be very aware of this issue, but some may not realize that this issue is right in our own backyard, in all of our communities. And some people have the impression that this is a problem somewhere else in the world, and it is, clearly, but it is happening in District 5280 and in our own backyards. So January has been made National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and specifically January 11th is dedicated annually to National Human Trafficking Awareness. This is a crime in which the traffickers use force, fraud, trickery, or coercion, coercion through threat of physical abuse, through drug, forcing drugs to force people to submit, to compel a person to perform either labor or other services or commercial sex. And it affects all populations, all socioeconomic groups, all genders, as well as ages and foreign nationals and US citizens. The US Defense Department continues to raise awareness and do its part to attempt to end this crime. It is really a stunning, powerful, tragic happening in the United States and locally. So the US State Department, I'm going to give you 2 sets of statistics. One is tracked by the US State Department and the other by a nonprofit organization. And the 3 states in America with the most human trafficking are Texas, New York, and California. San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego are 3 of the 10 highest child sex trafficking regions in the entire country, in America. And in the United States, the US State Department posts these following statistics. 96% of traffic victims are females. 82% are trafficked for sex. And 11% are trafficked for labor, leaving another 7% trafficked for different forms of trafficking. It's estimated, and again, these statistics are really hard to track. Not all cases are reported. A lot of this is still very underground and hidden, but it's estimated by the State Department that approximately 150,000 victims are currently held as sex slaves. 50%, and this is the statistic that really gets to me, 50% of the traffic victims are minor children with an average age of just 12. And the average time that that child is trafficked per day for sex is 5 times. Yes, you're right. It's just stunning and so disturbing. The average age or life expectancy of a child that is brought into this life and they do not volunteer. A lot of people think, you know, people that are involved in sex, in commercial sex, are doing this voluntarily. But the average lifespan of a child who is lured into this life and they are tricked into this life, I guarantee you they are not volunteering for this, is just 7 years. And the cause of death being overdose of drugs by their trafficker, beaten to death, or they take their own life in desperation. So just taking a look, this is the other set of statistics that I'm going to share with you. That is, there is a nonprofit organization, the Polaris Project, and they track statistics as well. But just take a look at this map. All of the colors represent cases that we know of where children and adults have been trafficked or are being trafficked in the United States. The red representing sort of the hot spot areas. So as you can see, in California, it's Southern California, San Diego, Los Angeles, and then up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And just while you take a look at this, you may be asking yourself, how does this possibly happen? And it's estimated that 70% of the victims of trafficking come from already vulnerable populations. So these are children who are running away from home. They're running from domestic violence in their home, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or just outright neglect. And if one were to go down to the bus stop in downtown Los Angeles, pimps are lined up, traffickers are lined up, and as unaccompanied minors get off those buses, they approach these children and say, do you need a place to stay? I can give you a place to stay. I can feed you. I can get you a job. I can help you out. And innocently, they're tricked into thinking that they will have protection and safety. But the remaining 30% are coming from intact families, families like yours and mine, our children, our grandchildren, and they are being lured into this life, tricked into this life through social media and the internet and the dark net. Just keep that in mind. It's just so important that we understand that everyone is vulnerable to this situation. So the Polaris Project cites these statistics. I'll just share a couple of more. That 79% of known victims are minor children. That's how they're tracking. And that 80% of the known victims are female. So once again, we know that there are males that are being trafficked and all different ages, but generally the focus is after young women, after minor females. So I share with everyone the concern. I have 5 grandchildren, and I look at these grandchildren and I worry. I talk to my children, their parents, you know, about this issue. And if we do nothing else, we have to talk about this issue and raise awareness. I wanted to also share, while I have this slide up, this is a website that I launched a couple of years back, right after my governor year. And the URL is at the bottom of the slide, rotariansfightinghumantrafficking.org. I invite you to explore this. This has a wealth of information, all kinds of resources. We have partners, etc. I'll talk to you a little bit more about the website, but write this down and take some time to look at the website. And while it's up on the screen, I want to share some stories with you. The first story is a survivor that I met. She was rescued out of the life, but she was lured into this life, tricked into this life at age 12. And she shared with me that by the time she was 14, she was being trafficked for sex 7 times a night. She was allowed to sleep 4 hours a day, that was it. And then she was essentially raped 7 times per night at age 14. And I know this is tough to hear, but this is reality. Another story, I was recently talking, I work with a lot with government agencies and nonprofits who are boots on the ground daily with this. And I was talking recently with the CEO of a nonprofit that was working with a 10-year-old child. And when that child was 5 years old, it was reported to the courts that her mother was an addict and she was being neglected. So the courts awarded the biological father full custody of this child at 5 years old. And when she was 8, it was discovered that he had been selling her for sex for 3 years, from the age of 5 to 8 years old. Another survivor that I have met and talked to was a teenager when she was raped by her next door neighbor. Her father was in law enforcement, and the next door neighbor who raped her threatened her that he would kill her and kill her family if she told anyone. And she was afraid. She was afraid, and he moved her and groomed her into commercial sexual exploitation. And he had her on a schedule, and she would go over to his house. Both her parents worked, and this was after school. She was going to school. She would be commercially, sexually exploited by this neighbor, and then went home for dinner. And she was so frightened by him, and it took her at least, I think she shared that it was a year before she was able to finally tell her family what was happening. And finally, the last story I want to share with you to just let you understand that this is really happening. These are all situations in the Los Angeles region, in our area. I met another survivor. She's now an advocate and works for one of the nonprofits in our area. She was in an MBA program at Cal State Northridge. Bright young woman, great student, came from a family like yours and mine, super parents. And she met a young man online and was very cautious. She took 2 months of talking with him through social media and online, through the internet, before she agreed to meet him for dinner, and never realizing that those 2 months were the start of a grooming period. And when she met him face to face, he continued to groom her, leading her to believe that they had a loving relationship. And eventually, through the same coercion, basically through threat of physical abuse, he would drug her into submission, and he pimped her. He sold her to other men. And it took her a while as well it was, I think, a couple of years in her situation where she finally was able to escape. I mean, they're enslaved. And so I share these 4 stories. I know they're tough stories, but I do want you to understand that this is happening, and we have to be concerned about this issue. So moving on, I want to tell you a little bit about the website. Who joins this website? If you explore it, you'll see that there are several Rotary clubs that are listed as partners. Rotary districts, we're adding partners all the time. Nonprofit organizations are listed as partners, and we're collaborating with them along with law enforcement agencies and other governmental programs who are working to assist these victims and survivors of both sex trafficking and labor trafficking to help them move out of the life and into recovery, which is a long road for them. We're proud partners right now of 21 nonprofit organizations, 22 Rotary clubs, 3 Rotary districts, which are LA, Sacramento, San Diego. And we continue to update this website daily and add partners as needed and asked. So if your club, for example, would want to join, just philosophically that you support this movement, this fight against human trafficking, there's no financial cost. I bear all the costs. That's part of my way of giving to this issue. We do not ask your club to do anything in terms of using your sources. And your club would be listed as a partner and linked. We put a link to your club's website. So if somebody was on the website interested in this issue and somehow helping and saw that your club was supporting this issue, might be interested in joining your club. And then we also list any nonprofits that you might be partnering with. And we also share any events and projects that your club or the nonprofits, any of our partners, we put them on the website. We have a list of resources, so we list nonprofits as resources. We also list fundraising and awareness raising events, news stories. This is updated every day with current news on this issue. And if the club would be interested, I just would ask that the board meets and the board would approve, and the president would just get in touch with me and let me know. And again, there's no pressure. My speech is not to pressure you to join, but if your club were interested and wanted to support, even like I say, just philosophically, this fight against human trafficking. So the last thing that I want to talk to you about is District 5280, the new cause-based Rotary Club. And Rotary last year created a new model of club and called the Cause-Based Club, and club members would be passionate about a particular social issue, whatever that might be. The club would focus their service efforts exclusively toward that social cause. So Governor Bett, last May, right before she became governor, approached me, and knowing the work that I was doing, and she is very interested in this cause, asked me if I would start a cause-based club based on the human trafficking issue. And of course, like all other clubs, it required 20 new members to charter. I would have then I agreed, but I said I can't leave my club of 25 years, but I would be willing, and I called RI directly and talked to them, and they allowed me to create a 5-member Rotarian mentoring team that we would all commit to supporting the new club for 3 years. And of course, in this day and age, we chose to become an e-club that met bi-monthly. And we ended up we set a goal. So Bet approached me in May. I put together a strategic plan. We announced it at the August district breakfast, and with a goal of chartering the club. And I knew it was an aggressive goal, but we were going to try to charter by March, by last month. And so we announced this in August, and we chartered on October 15th with 24 members. And now we will be inducting at the next meeting our 35th member. And my vision was to bring along and into membership were representatives from governmental agencies and the nonprofits in the region. So of our 35 member membership, 9 of those are nonprofits and governmental programs. And we have 2 more in the queue, 1 individual person who's interested in this cause, and another nonprofit coming on board. So forgive me, I'm having a little bit of a trouble with my arrow. I'm going to lower my screen. I have 3 screens. Here we go. So we chartered on October 15th, D5280, Rotarians Fighting Human Trafficking. I'm very excited. It is up and running. We have already worked with 4 nonprofits who are members of the club and with projects at the holiday time. And then we are also distributing funds at the end of this month to nonprofits who are working in the area with the victims and survivors. And I'm happy to say that we have a global grant application in working with CAST, which is Coalition Against Slave Trafficking, which is the mothership in the Los Angeles region, and it's actually developed. The CEO of that is unbelievable, and she's gone international. So we are working on a $50,000 global grant for vocational training for the survivors, so to help them gain gainful employment, to help them step out of this life. And of course, there are many other services needed because of the trauma that they've suffered. But I thank you so much for inviting me today to speak on this issue. And again, if there's nothing else, just spread the word. Even spread the URL for the website so that people understand that this is an issue we all need to be aware of. One more thing before I sign off. If I've caught anyone's attention, one of the members of our new club, one of the very prominent nonprofits in our area, Journey Out, is working with the FBI, and they are putting on an event, and this is posted under events on the website, www.rotariansfightinghumantrafficking.org, for April 27th, next week at 5 p.m. And this is geared toward teens. So it's a collaboration between the FBI and Journey Out as a preventative educational tool. So I encourage you, we have spread the word. It will be announced throughout the district, throughout our Interact clubs, our Rotaract clubs. And I encourage you, if only yourself you take a look at it, but I encourage you to invite the teens in your life to take a look at this program. And thank you once again. Nancy, you're muted.
That's weird. Okay. Thank you, Cozette. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow, thank you. That was a very powerful and important talk. And Chris Gaynor, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you for sharing this information. Are any of these traffickers ever brought to justice? any of these young ladies that are reintegrated into society, are they able to identify and bring the police or the FBI
These are
into?
two great questions, Chris. Thank you for asking. The penalties need to be stiffer, no question, but they are brought, the traffickers themselves, the Johns as well, you know, these, if we can reduce the demand, if we can make people understand what they're doing when they're paying for sex. But there is in the district attorney's office, and we are working on a forum with the supervising deputy DA who prosecutes, along with his team of 5, who prosecutes the bad guys. And there is new law in California which has deemed that minor children are not able, they don't have the ability, the maturity to consent to prostitution. So initially they were being arrested and they were being imprisoned and they were really a victim. And so now they are detained, they are not arrested. And there is another division in children's court. They are assigned an attorney to represent them through the steps, trying to help them. They move them through the different agencies to get them a place to stay and where they're safe and protected. I even have had a deputy sheriff in Riverside call me and say, help me find somebody. They had to move their victim to Los Angeles because the pimp was after her. And this is big money. The average that a trafficker makes trafficking a child for sex is anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 per year per child. This is a very lucrative criminal activity, growing to surpass drugs because they don't have to buy their drugs again once they sell them. They sell these children over and over. There are law firms now that are working nationwide to actually file civil action suits against traffickers. So thank you, Chris, for allowing me to throw that information in.
No, I would like to add, obviously, if they're making that kind of money, they're not paying taxes on it. So it certainly would seem that the Criminal Investigation Division of the IRS would be very interested in people such as this. And the victims who do have families, I would be surprised that they wouldn't want justice for their children.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're right about the IRS. I mean, all the governmental agencies are really becoming aware. This started about 20 years ago, but it's finally getting some momentum out there. But the governmental agencies are, they're looking at the dollars that are involved here and what's going on. And as far as many of the nonprofits in our region that end up working with the victims, moving them into becoming survivors, reunification with family, if that's feasible and reasonable, does happen. But we even have an elected official in the Los Angeles region whose niece was a victim. So this is real stuff.
Cozette, I have a question. How did you first become aware and take an interest in this cause?
I think about that a lot myself. When you mentioned that I had a previous career, and when I was changing careers, I was a dancer, and my undergraduate degree from USC is in dance, and I was in the performing arts, and I was in my early 40s my body was wearing out, and so I always knew I would do something different. And at the time, that I was looking around. Gil Garcetti was our district attorney, and he was starting, I was watching the news one night, and he was starting 2 new divisions in the DA's office, prosecuting sex abuse crimes and domestic violence. So I said, that's what I want to do. And I went to law school, and I jumped around a little bit, but eventually I did some pro bono work at Downtown Central representing victims of domestic violence, and eventually started my own law firm and went to the civil side of domestic violence, which is in the family law court. And so I spread my practice a little bit, you know, included other practice in the family law court, but it's just something that has really angered me. And then becoming aware along the way, I was an extern for a federal court magistrate in the criminal area, and becoming aware of the trafficking issue. And then it was very underground. It's just always been there. And then when I got in the line of district governor, there was a forum. The worlds came together, and this was recognized by Rotary, but it, once again, not quite as active as they are now with the issue. So for about the last 7 or 8 years, the 2 universes, Rotary and, you know, my passion came together, and I have had a platform that has moved this along.
That's amazing. That's very impressive. Do we have more questions?
I have a question.
Gordon, hi.
Hi.
Gordon.
Hi, Cozette. You mentioned laws. My question is, are our laws up to date and have the ability to deal with these issues? And if not, what's happening on that front?
Good question. And coming from you, Gordon, you're always putting me on the spot. So, you know, this is a touchy issue within Rotary as we start these cause-based clubs, because Rotary is supposed to be apolitical. In my personal, let me step back from Rotary. In my personal opinion, the laws are not tough enough. We need laws that would deter some of this activity, especially by the Johns. Right now, the Johns, if they are picked up in a sweep, and it's like getting a traffic ticket. They have just go online to a webinar, go through the webinar, and that's it. They're done. If we had less demand, this would not be happening as much. But also with, they're moving on the issue of the prosecution of traffickers, and there's a bill right now that is being, that's on the floor. I believe it's a Senate bill. And these are always, I mean, we just, like I said, recently deemed that minor children could not be prosecuted or arrested. And then one other thing that has just been passed and should have started effective January 1 of last year, but then COVID hit, is a mandate for all the schools to include in their curriculum preventative education for 7th through 12th grade. But there's a lot of work with legislation to really, really fight this issue. There's a lot more that needs to be done.
Michael.
Cozette, I know Pacific Palisades had, I was making up there a couple of years ago, and I forget if she was doing similar work to yourself, but was also a victim. So I'll try to call there, or maybe you've already met this woman who has some affiliation, I think, with Pacific Palisades. But along the lines of what can be done, what, if any, governmental, or I would imagine there is some charitable contributions, but like the victims you went through, when these young ladies want to, you know, come back to a real life, what avenues are available to them, and maybe housing being provided or meeting all their other needs when they've never been met?
So what's going on with housing right now is there are 3 levels of housing. There's emergency housing. So, you know, when a victim is rescued, there are places, and sometimes during the pandemic, this has been really tricky because these places that normally would take these children or adults, whomever, in, had an issue because they had to space and distance. So the ability to house was cut down. So the pandemic has really escalated the issue in housing. But there's the first level is emergency housing, and they just continue to call and call and call. And it's just like, you know, when I got the call from Riverside, they brought that child over into LA County. So they may have to go, of course, they're trying to reunite with families. And then there's temporary housing, and then there's permanent housing. So there is all kinds of work going on to locate situations where we can put a roof over these people's heads while they are going through services, you know, therapy, of course, vocational training. And at the other end, this global grant that we're doing, we're hoping to involve, aside from the things you already mentioned, you know, donations in kind, things that they might need, dollar donations, et cetera, but that in the vocational training that we can develop some internships or job opportunities through the Rotary world in the Los Angeles region, you know, where we might be able to help assist and give someone's training or a job, et cetera.
Thank you.
Cozette, I have another question. I can't help think about the ability of some of these children who have been subjected to the extreme sexual abuse that you described to heal.
Yes.
Physically and emotionally.
Yes, it is a major challenge. No question, you can all imagine. That's why we have to work from the preventative side. We have to get this information out. But yes, and the story I told you about the little 5-year-old girl who was trafficked by her father from 5 to 8, she's now 10, and she is going through terrible PTSD. She is struggling terribly to adjust. You know, it's just very, very sad. And so we really have to work on the end of preventing this from happening, you know, spreading the word, telling our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors' children. We just have to raise the awareness so that they understand what's happening when someone is starting to groom them. And often it's a little relationship that starts on the internet or through social media in particular. And right now during the pandemic, our kids are, you know, so closed off, and that's how they're communicating, is through social media and the internet. So they have to learn the signs of someone who is attempting to groom them. And trust me, Nancy, when I first started really actively working in this arena, I would go from meeting to meeting with different governmental agencies, nonprofits, walking away saying, I mean, I was so overwhelmed. I thought, what can I possibly do? But luckily over time, this has developed, collaborations have developed, and, you know, inch by inch, like we always say, you know, if we can help just one person along the way, but the awareness is rising, which is good.
I can see that it would be overwhelming. My hat's off to you, not only for taking on all that you do, but I'm also intrigued and impressed by the fact that you don't stop at raising awareness, which is very important, but that your organization is very action oriented and you have these relationships with law enforcement, and that is extremely effective organization building.
Thank you. Thank you. It's my life.
And a life well spent, clearly.
Thank you.
Mark, do you have your hand up?
I do. Cozette, real quick last question. I know we're running out of time. Has there been any kind of study done, psychological analysis done, that how this affects their lives later on as adults, their ability to have a normal relationship, you know, with their significant other, or are they just go through a period of divorces, or do they enter a life of prostitution, or this has such a huge impact.
There are studies going on. There's not a lot of data out there right now, you know, long term, but the reality is this is a struggle. And many of them, the way that they're surviving best is to become advocates. So many of them are working for nonprofits, for governmental agencies. They're activists and raising awareness, but that's sort of, their feet are still in the reality of what they have been through. So some do go on, you know, for sure, to new and better lifestyles, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge. I don't want to say it's hopeless. The more that we raise awareness and the more programs that are developed to surround these survivors and embrace these survivors, you know, the better off they will be. So there has been progress for sure, but it's a steep hill. Someone yesterday, I was speaking to another Rotary Club yesterday, and someone brought up the analysis of, well, maybe they should have something like AA, where you have a sponsor and you have group meetings and, you know, where they're still in touch and they have people who can understand what the challenges are. And I thought that was, I get very interesting suggestions and creative thinking so there's, you know, there's hope out there for sure.
Thank you.
Well, that's truly impressive. Cozette, thank you so much for being with us today and educating us about a very, very important subject, and to see that our city is one of the worst in the country for this kind of activity is really appalling to recognize, but I think you've given us all a lot to think about. I heard you speak at, I think it was Pets last year. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh, this club, our club needs to hear what you have to say. So I really thank you for taking the time to be here, present to us, to answer all of our questions. As a token of our appreciation, we will be making a donation in your name to the Westwood branch of the Los Angeles Public Library. And I personally, and I think a lot of us, are going to be really interested to see how your organization develops and grows and continues to do very important work in the world.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and thank you for having me today.
It truly has been an honor. I also want to thank Michael Lushing again for being here. I want to thank our special guests for joining us today. Great to see you. And as always, it's a pleasure to see our members. So we will be meeting again next Thursday, April 29th, same time, same place. And everybody have a great, safe, and healthy week in the meantime. Goodbye.